We're here today with Colonel Brady Hauboldt. He is the Vice Commander of the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. Sir, thanks for sitting down with us today. We wanted to talk, obviously life has changed in the last 60 days or so, and so the work environment has changed right along with it. Can you just share some thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting word that the Air Force has chosen, the return to full capacity. You hear about many of our states and the locations that we have across Air Force Lifecycle Management Center reopening or returning to work or suspending the shelter in place, but Air Force Lifecycle Management Center and the Air Force never closed. We've stayed open through this. Our workforce has been very resilient and adaptive to the new telework workplace that we have, and the tools have come very quickly. So most importantly, we're going to hang on to those tools so that we can continue to telework. But as we talk about the Air Force returning to full capacity, it means different things in different places. If you're in a depot, it may mean everybody coming back to start depot operations. If you're on the flight line, it might mean turning jets. Within LCMC, we have varying levels of full capacity today. Some of our workforce is at 100%. Some of our PEOs even argue we're, in addition, higher than 100%. But some places, like our labs, our depot, our classified spaces, also need to start bringing people back to work. And so the important thing about a return to full capacity for Air Force Lifecycle Management Center is that not everybody needs to come to the office to be full capacity. We've asked our PEOs and directors to start thinking about who needs to, and it'll be a phased approach, and it may take months for everybody to come back to work. It may be never. We may continue a telework environment for a long, long time. So as we come back to work, as individuals do, like I am today, we have to take certain precautions, different than we did before, but it's really just about being safe and protecting not only ourselves but our coworkers around us, because we're in this together with the same mission and same jobs.
So in some instances, sir, that might be simple tasks that we do hundreds of times every day, opening a doorknob, turning on a light switch, things that we need to now think about, maybe sanitizing that area before we touch it or sanitizing ourselves after we touch it. Talk about some of those just typical functions.
Certainly, Daryl, thanks. You know, I hear about the UK talking about stay alert, I think is their phrase, and that's really just about thinking differently about what you're doing and how much space you're leaving between each other. Things that we should be doing anyhow. One of our deputies always reminds people to wash their hands after every meeting, and that's just a good practice. And she's been doing that for years, as long as I've known her, not just recently. We're following the Center for Disease Control guidance. We're going to apply those in our workspaces. Every workspace is different depending on where you are. Every environment, different situations exist in a cube farm versus a shared pod, a customer service desk. There's a lot of different environments, and so we can't precisely dictate what everybody would do at every location. But we're setting out some guidelines for supervisors, PEOs, and directors. Things like reminding people with symptoms to stay home. Anybody who has a fever, just stay home. We're trusting you that if you're not feeling well, don't come to the office and risk other people. Folks that are vulnerable should continue to telework as they have been, or if you've been living with vulnerable individuals. We're worried about contact tracing. So if you tomorrow come down with symptoms, Daryl, you need to be able to identify who you interacted with in the last few days so that we are able to go and test me and everybody else around us. We're thinking differently about how we come into work, how we come into the office. No need anymore to walk through other people's areas to get to your desk. If you can, please take the most direct route from the exterior door to your desk. We do and will continue to wear face coverings to and from meetings, to and from your office. Once you're in your workspace and you're by yourself, it's probably fine to take the mask off. That'll be your choice. We'll ask you as you go to meetings, if you can or cannot maintain a 6-foot social distance, to keep your mask on or your face covering on, but go ahead and take it off. Like Captain Lawball, my exec, is out the door. We talk to each other all day without a mask, but we're keeping our social distance. I ask folks to think about cleaning your workspace, your desk, your computer, your phone, but most importantly, the high touch areas where multiple people are touching. So for me, that's the keypad coming in the morning to open the door. I do prop the door open so that people don't have to touch the door throughout the day. Our light switches, our phones, anything that's a high touch, multiple user kind of area. And by all means, try to avoid common areas that lots of people are using, like a SIPRNet terminal that might be shared amongst multiple people. Please wipe that down before and after your turn. All of our installations at all of our locations across the world are going to have slightly different local conditions and local cleaning practices, but we'll stay looped in with all of those locations and try to make sure that you have a clean, safe work environment. But we will all have to do some of our own part to help maintain a clean workspace.
And it's interesting that you say personal responsibility plays a big role in this. Now, clearly, installations are going to have cleaning contracts, and those things will be in place and maybe even potentially ramped up in some instances, but that's not going to be the full solution. Personal responsibility is going to carry in, as well as for the organization to purchase and have on stock the proper supplies for you to be able to stay protected as well.
Yeah. So before the whole pandemic started, we were working very hard to increase the amount of contract cleaning that we had, the vacuuming, the restroom cleaning, and that's going to happen now with almost certainty. Of course, we have to modify the contracts and fund it, but that will be coming in due time. We're also working with our contracts team here in LCMC and SAF-AQ to set up blanket purchase agreements to buy larger numbers of protective masks and cleaning supplies and hand sanitizer. Expect to see that roll out into each of our facilities in due time. We're going to lean heavily on our supervisors and our chain of command to make sure those resources are in place before people come. But ultimately, I have to trust you and the people around me that they're washing their hands and they're cleaning and not unintentionally affecting me. You'll see people on the news and around town that are discarding a lot of the recommendations. But here in the workplace, we need, our Air Force needs you to stay safe and keep those around you safe. So we'll all have a hand in it, everything from wearing our face coverings to washing our hands.
Sir, based on the changes that have occurred recently, how is your day changed, and what does your typical day look like now?
It has been a big change. I have never teleworked until recently in my entire Air Force career. But one day I woke up and I realized it's a lot like traveling, where I do a job, I'm on the phone, I'm checking emails throughout the day. And so I've actually had to throttle back myself a little bit because I might work 12, 14, 15 hours a day when I'm traveling because I have nothing else to do. But I can't do that because I'm still home with my family, and thankfully we are all well and safe together. But my typical day, we have divided up the front office here in the LCMC commander section. We each come in one day a week, and so we are avoiding interaction. But there's always somebody here. The lights are always on in the LCMC front office. First thing I do is get logged on. And what I have found is while my teleworking, my VPN network seems to be working pretty well, thanks to our team at C3INN, when I come back to the office the first day, it does take a while to log back on and do all its updates. But while that's getting logged on, I spend my day organizing, or my morning organizing, figuring out what's on tap for the day, reviewing read-ahead materials, and just basically spending the 30 minutes or so I need to structure my day. Because once the clock starts, typically about 8:30 is my first meeting, I find myself in back-to-back meetings all day long. So in the past, I would be running from meeting to meeting, typically walking in right as the horn sounded. But now it's simply a matter of flipping to another phone, my CVR Teams, my Zoom, whatever it might be. I am switching from meeting to meeting in the same way. It's a very full day. I do try to break for lunch, take the dogs for a walk if I'm at home, clear my mind a little bit, and check some emails to catch up on. I've been a believer in short meetings, and so I try to set up my day around 30-minute meetings as much as possible. Unfortunately, my schedule's often not my own, so I move back and forth between others' meetings, oftentimes representing Air Force Lifecycle Management Center.
So you mentioned that you no longer have the need to move to physically go to a meeting. Now you can just log into the meeting when it's time for the meeting to start. Have you found other ways where you've recaptured time throughout your day? Because previously that would have been wasted time, maybe 15 or 20 minutes for you to move to that meeting. Now that's 15 or 20 minutes that you can be productive doing something else.
Well, number one, time savings is we've all stopped traveling for the most part, and that saves days every trip. You think about traveling, even if you're going to Hanscom, it takes almost a whole day to get there. One time traveling to San Antonio, it took me a day and a half, and I was not able to get there in time for the meeting that I had planned. And so that's a lot of lost time. You try to make the most of it, but that's a big savings. On a micro scale, even driving over to headquarters Air Force Materiel Command for a meeting, it's not something I have to do anymore. I flip on the CVR Teams and I'm instantly connected. And they know who's there, so there's no lengthy roll calls, and we've really found the tools to be pretty efficient. A lot of us are struggling with how to actually use them efficiently because they're new to us, but I think as time goes on, we're going to get more and more efficient with the actual tools as well.
So the comm folks have really kind of ramped up the tools. In the beginning, I want to say we had a conversation with General McMurray, and he gave them a C grade and out of the gate, but we've made a lot of progress. I think in the beginning we were doing a lot of telephone meetings where, like you mentioned, you might have to spend 10 minutes of the meeting taking roll, where now if you go on CVR Teams, you can add in the video element and also don't have to go through a roll call, and you can also show slides to people. Talk about the teams or the tools that have rolled out and how they've improved our ability to telework over the course of this time.
Well, as I mentioned, our C3I and team up at, I shouldn't say up at Hanscom, they're all over, multiple locations, has really been leading the charge to improve our IT tools. This coronavirus pandemic has driven the Air Force, the decision makers, to actually let us field them. And we took a great briefing from Lieutenant Colonel Ted Erickson from HNI yesterday. He briefed AFMC and General Bunch and the team on all the great tools that are coming. He shared some data that the Air Force had collected on user satisfaction, and it was somewhere between 50 and 75% dissatisfied with our IT tools before the pandemic. I don't know what they are today, but I know that before we had access to all these tools, it was one of my biggest frustrations in my job was the IT infrastructure. It's getting better. The availability of the tools are great. The VPN has been almost seamless. In fact, I would say my telework IT experience is even better than my at-work IT experience these days. But as you mentioned, Teams is on our government computers, on the AFNet, but also CVR Teams on the open private computers, bring your own device kinds of things. I have it on my cell phone and on my home computer. Fed Zoom as well has opened up some additional access to a Zoom type meeting, and we've played with some of the others like BackZip. I text message a lot more than I ever did, but really learning how to use all these tools. And every day I see new announcements and more capability being approved for release and extended. And so there's been talk about some of this going away. Everybody all the way up to General Bunch, then the 4-star MAJCOM commanders are adamant that we need to keep access to all these great tools so that we can be more efficient and effective, even if we aren't teleworking in a year from now, but we still have access to all those tools.
And it seems like a lot of our teammates in LCMC have found innovative ways to put those tools into practice. I've seen everything from PT groups to engineers doing assessments over email or over video chat. Talk a little bit about kind of the ingenuity from the field and how They've been innovative and founded new best practices.
I think a lot of our workforce, especially our more junior workforce, embraced it immediately. It was something that they were much more comfortable with. Some of us older heads had to learn, and we're still learning. But we're trying to use those tools. You mentioned the propulsion team doing PT together. I saw the simulators program office did a push-up contest, and you mentioned the A10 team doing battle damage repair over the computer. I think it's happening all over the place. The one thing I really worry about the most is our connectivity, the human element of talking to people. For some of us, it is natural to talk to humans, to be around humans, and for some of us, they're comfortable doing that via phone or computer. But I worry about those people that you might not be hearing from, how they're doing mentally, emotionally, without that access to their coworkers and peers. So we've asked and encouraged all of the supervisors and teammates across the center, please reach out to your coworkers and check in on them and use those tools to have a coffee together or a happy hour or whatever else you need to do to just check in on people, make sure they're doing all right. And also use this time to mentor. You don't have to be face-to-face to do mentoring. As I said earlier, this is a local matter, frankly, in what the local conditions are. The prevalence of COVID-19 in your local condition may be different than when your coworkers in another location across the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center. So we're not going to rush into reopening offices. We're going to make sure that the supplies are in hand before you do. We'll continue to let people come in as they need to, using good practices like I discussed. But it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a lot of teleworking for most of us, and it's going to be a different office environment than we're used to. And we'll ask for everybody's patience as we work through this. But we're fully comfortable. The Air Force Life Cycle Management Center leadership team across all the PEOs and directors and the commander are fully comfortable that we can take a lagging approach to returning people to the workspace, work centers, based on mission need and still get to full capacity as quickly as possible. And our Air Force needs us to do that.